Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to this talk this afternoon, where we're presenting our fabulous composer in residence, Victoria Kelly, who is a wonderful composer who actually was just awarded the SOUNZ Contemporary Award last week for her Requiem, which is, it's an extraordinary achievement. Every year one composer wins this award, and it really is a mark of absolute sort of supreme achievement, exactly, as a composer. So congratulations, Victoria. So who was here for the first performance today? Okay, so maybe half of you. Half of you have heard Victoria's new commission, and half of you haven't. And so the composer in residence position is a very important part of this festival. Each year we invite a different composer to come and we perform their works throughout the festival. It's incredibly important to present New Zealand music, and fabulous New Zealand music at that. And we always also commission our composer to write a new work. This year we actually got 2 new works because we convinced Victoria to write a little fanfare of sorts, which was very curious in a way, because Victoria's music, for those of you that are familiar with it, is incredibly spacious and deeply emotional. That's how I find it. And what came out of with Victoria's little commission fanfare was a bird duo, basically. And maybe I'll get you to just talk about that, just the tiniest bit. How come that music? Because it was active birds and for Ben and I to play, and it was completely different to anything I've ever heard Victoria write. So how come?
Well, because it wasn't about me. It was about you and Ben. Yeah, that's the simple answer. I'm kind of, I was lucky enough that Justine and Ben programmed a piece of mine last year at the festival, which was also performed in this beautiful room, and what a mighty 2019 Pinot Noir vintage this is. This beautiful room, they played my string quartet Songs Without Words, which I wrote 17 years ago. And I had just come down to hear it, not really understanding the context of the festival that Jake and Ben had made. And I got here and it was just so beautiful to be here. This delightful energy, all of the enthusiasm that you guys have created and all of the people that you've brought together. So I was fortunate to take away a sense of that energy. And then when you asked me to be your composer in residence this year, I just thought I'd take my time about answering. I wanted to no, I'm kidding. I answered right away and said an enthusiastic yes. And then when Justine suggested that maybe a little piece that they might be able to use to begin the festival, that piece came very quickly because I was thinking about the nature of them and who they were and how they interacted, and I wanted to make something that sounded of this place, but also that sounded like you guys. So it's kind of 2 kind of half-bird songs that they each play that form a unique conglomerate. Yeah.
And it's spectacular to play. It's a lovely, charming piece of music, so thank you. And in contrast to that, this piece today that you're going to hear, Ensemble, is very much of yourself, yes. Right? And it's very much a theme of your music. In this festival, we've had, let me think, Sono, which was piano trio I was involved with in the first day, and that was written in 2000. Actually, maybe, what was the inspiration for that one?
Well, I ran away to Brazil because I fell in love with a man. All that time ago, and maybe I'm revealing too much of myself now. So that piece, I had actually been commissioned to write it by a group called the Turnovsky Trio, which contained Sam Canisi, Catherine Mackay, and Ashley Brown. And at the time, Ashley Brown was the cellist of the Turnovsky Trio. And I wrote that piece for them. And then I ran away to Brazil because I'd met this really lovely man and spent a few months there and learnt this word, this Portuguese word, sono, which means to experience a dream and to not want to wake from it, to want to return to it. And so I wrote this piece about this kind of extraordinary event in my life, which felt like a dream and which I had hoped to be able to return to. But of course, things don't always work out. And I didn't end up with that man, but I did end up marrying Ashley Brown, the cellist of the Turnovsky Trio.
And another connection, Victoria spoke the other night on Friday at Teatro Mera in Queenstown about a work that we performed by Schnittke, a piano trio. And I hear that piece in sono. And is there any coincidence there? Is there a connection?
Between sono and Schnittke. I think that the piece that's really connected to Schnittke is the piece for violin and piano, but I think that ever since I discovered Schnittke's music, it has had an unavoidable connection to everything I've ever written. And right up until now, right up until the Requiem, where the way that the piano quintet that was performed the other day ends is the way my Requiem begins. Yeah. Even though you wouldn't be able to tell it because it's arranged in a completely different way and it's in a different key, that idea of this kind of repeating triadic system is exactly how my Requiem begins, on purpose as a homage to Schnittke in my Requiem. So there is absolutely... I think what's a line from Schnittke in sono is the repeating note, which you hear in the piano quintet when he's just got, but in his iteration it's quite brutal and it's quite penetrating, whereas in my piece it's a much gentler, more hypnotic use of a repeated note.
And so a lot of these pieces that we've played, you've made it very clear that they've come from your life experiences. The piece for violin and piano was at a time when your father died. Goodnight Kiwi, your mother was terminally ill, and that piece came out of that. Moving on to Ensemble, you said the other day that you're perhaps at the start of a new experimental place in terms of potentially finding a new sort of voice. So it'd be interesting to hear about that. I certainly heard you very clearly in the piece in Ensemble that you will hear or you have heard. So maybe tell us a little bit about that transition that you're going through.
Well, it's a funny old life, isn't it? I have always, when I was born, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a composer and a musician. And I did become a musician and a composer, and I spent many, many years of my life doing that. And I reached a point when I was heading towards my 40th birthday, having gone through all sorts of iterations as a composer. Contemporary classical music has always been my passion and the thing that I've loved the most. But then there was a point in my youth where I had the opportunity to write the music for a short film, and having that experience of putting music to pictures and seeing how those things illuminate each other sparked me in a completely different direction. And so I began writing music for film and television as well, and also collaborating with pop musicians and all sorts of things, because I have always been quite a musical magpie, and I'm curious and interested in every kind of music, and if there's an opportunity to explore it, then I will. And then I had a family, so I had a daughter and then I had twins, and working in that environment where you are writing to deadlines, writing on low budget productions, you've got a lot of pressure on you, having 3 small children at the same time makes that quite difficult to manage. And I reached a point where I was so exhausted both physically and creatively and emotionally that I thought I could no longer bear the unpredictability of a musical career, and I'd also started to hate writing music. And when I realised that I hated writing music, I thought, well, then I have to stop doing it, because I didn't mean stop doing it forever, but I just didn't want to be destroying the thing that had given me joy and meaning for my whole life. So I went and found another job, and I did that for 7 years, and it was a very interesting, very illuminating, fascinating 7 years. But as time went on, that note in my head just kept going and going and going, and suddenly I started to fill up again. And during the kind of almost coincidentally during the COVID process, I just thought to myself, here I am, there's this piece that I've wanted to write for 30 years. I've been telling people about it forever. I'd contacted the poets 20 years earlier, the Requiem, yes, with my grand idea to write this Requiem. I'd got their permission, and every maybe 3 years or so I'd write and say, "Hi, Bill Manhire. You know, I told you about that Requiem. Well, I haven't forgotten." And finally I thought, I just have to. I can't not write music. And so I made quite a big and financially ridiculous decision to leave my job and go back to composing. And so the place where I find myself in now is I got to the end of that massive 30-year journey of writing my Requiem, and it was performed. And now I'm beginning life as a freelance composer of contemporary classical music, feeling very full of ideas and very full of curiosity about what I might be able to explore, and not wanting to repeat myself, but neither do I want to articulate anything that isn't authentic. And so the opportunity of the piece for horn, violin and cello was to explore something totally else. And I took some risks, and I think I wrote quite an odd piece, which is still completely true. And it came out odd because it is true, you know, like I wanted to think about the child that I was when I was making decisions about my career and making decisions about a musical instrument to play without any sense, you know, that beautiful innocence, all the possibility, no sense of what the consequences are, very perfunctory ideas about what things are, not a developed idea of what an instrument is as a child. Yes, hopefully as an adult I have a little bit more of an idea, although I'm not sure. I think we all remain children in some way. And so now I'm kind of going through that process of thinking, what might my music be like now that I'm 50 years old? And is it different from the music I wrote when I was 40 or when I was 30? And what are all the things that have happened to me? What are all of the things that I've heard? Who are all of the people that I've met? And how does that find its way into my language?
So I also asked you the other day what your process was like, and whether it's a cerebral one or a visceral one or emotional one, and you had some ideas about that?
I think it's ultimately an emotional one. I'm curious to explore all of the other dimensions, though. I think I'm very interested in large-scale work now, having written a Requiem with an orchestra and a choir and soloists. It's kind of addictive because it makes a very big noise. And there's something just about the power of harnessing those things and of uniting all of those sounds into a single iteration that's really, I don't know, you used the word visceral. It is visceral. It's visceral to feel that sound, and intuitive too. So I do come from a place of feeling, I think. I think my music is fundamentally emotional, and I think probably emotionally direct. I don't play games about the emotions that I'm trying, well, play games that I don't mean to say that. I mean, I wear my heart on the sleeve, is what I do musically, and I just try to let it be what it is.
So Ensemble, the piece that you're going to hear today, you have talked about how you came up with the concept for that piece in response primarily to our theme this year of identity, dimensions of identity. So you can perhaps tell us how that informed your new piece.
So as well as the theme of identity that the festival has presented as a provocation, because it is a beautiful thing to think about not just the piece you're writing, but how it fits into the place that it will go, and the program that surrounds it, and the other music that will get played. Then there was also the ensemble that I was asked to write for. I was asked to write for horn, violin, and cello. And when I was thinking about that, and I hope that I don't repeat myself when I talk about the piece just before it's performed, when I was a kid, I was given a choice between the oboe and the French horn, and I chose the oboe. And so this piece is an exploration of the horn. You know, what would the horn have been like as an instrument to play? Who would I have been? What universe would I have lived in? What alternative universe would I have lived in if I had played that instrument instead? And so that was really where that piece came from. So an idea to explore maybe not this identity, but an identity that doesn't exist on a different plane.
And this particular ensemble, horn, violin and cello, how did that challenge you or bring up different ideas for the sounds you wanted, the music that you composed?
So there's two things about that. One is that the horn is a wind instrument. I know it's a brass instrument, but it requires breath. And a stringed instrument is not. So when you're writing for horn, you have to think about whether or not the performer will live. And having been an oboist, I really understand that. It's one of the reasons I stopped playing the oboe, which is a beautiful instrument. I've got a very complex relationship with it, but I used to find the effort required to play it and to express yourself while fighting for breath to be a difficult tension. And I always envied string players, who have other challenges, of course, the ability to be able to sustain sound without having to worry about passing out. So there's that. That's one dimension of the horn versus the strings. And the other is volume. The other is the nature of the sound. You know, the horn, the reason that the horn is still around today is because of its ancient importance, its fundamental importance to people in the way that it's evolved as an instrument hand in hand with human beings. It's a method of communication. It's a way to communicate and call and signal and hunt, and it offers many, many different things as a practical element of art and humanity combined, rather than an abstract one. And so I thought about that too. I thought about that role that the horn has, whereas there's kind of maybe a more esoteric function for the strings, and balancing that on stage, balancing this mighty sound of the horn with a different kind of mighty sound from the strings, and how to create an ensemble from those three instruments, even though they're so different. So I explored that a little bit. I explored how to put the horn into chords and have that horn sit there in a beautiful balance. And in some instances, I get the horn to play a multiphonic where he blows into the instrument, and while it's making its notes, so maybe the horn's going doo, he's playing that note's coming out, and then the horn player also sings at the same time into the instrument, and he will go do. So then you hear both da and da at the same time coming out of the horn, which makes a kind of, not just those two notes, then you hear all these other kind of beaty noises that come out of it too. And how beautiful and weird and complicated that is, and how each kind of beating noise might be a universe of its own, and how then you bring the strings in around that. So I got the horn to kind of do this little interval, and you hear those two notes, and then you hear the cello join it, then you hear the violin join it, and the next thing you know, you've got a 5-note chord from 3 instruments. So things like that, beautiful things to explore about the horn, and how it relates to those 2 other instruments that are essentially kind of an entwining web around it. They're similar. It's on its own. It's not an equilateral triangle. How to try and make it balance. Yeah.
Is there anything else in the piece that you think people could listen out for, or it sounds like you've kind of just described a lot of that. Is there anything else?
There's plenty. Yeah, okay. There's plenty. But I'll be repeating myself a little bit just ahead of the performance. But one of the other things I've experimented with the horn, and it is I consider this to be a very simple and very direct piece. I don't know if you understand what microtones are, but if you think about a major scale, da da da, and then you think about a chromatic scale, smaller intervals, da 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 da, and then you think about the fact that they can get even smaller again. So da 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 da. The microtones are those things that fit into the gaps, and horns do them beautifully. There are ways that they can finger notes and you hear something that doesn't quite sound in tune, but it's gorgeous. And I thought, with the idea of my piece occupying these different universes, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if he plays a theme, but some of those notes sit slightly outside the tonal universe of what he's playing. And so you will hear the horn theme diverge from what we consider our tonality to be. And that's, it doesn't happen, I didn't do a lot, but it is a kind of an important part of the piece. And the other thing is that there's lots of starts and stops. There's a 3-note theme. I kind of hit you in the face with it quite a lot. It's very direct, and it just comes all the time as kind of points of starting and points of stopping, because, when you're 8 years old and you're thinking about what you might want to do with something, your thinking isn't complex. Your thinking is quite impulsive, and your thinking is quite perfunctory and possibly even petulant. So there are moments in the piece where it just starts or stops. There's a moment of kind of explosiveness in it, because there's a little part of me, bless my mother and may she rest in peace, that is kind of furious with the fact that she didn't let me play the violin, which is what I really wanted to play. And I wonder what my life would have been like if I had played the violin. And so there's a little moment in the piece where you hear this little violin melody just creep out, and it's like, what's the universe I live in where I can play that?
It's incredibly beautiful. So congratulations. I'm looking forward to hearing it again. It's really a privilege to have you here and to be playing your music. And I'm disappointed that I didn't get to play the commission. We have so many pieces in this festival. It's an incredible jigsaw puzzle working out who's going to play what. And that didn't work out, but I played two others. Beautiful, beautiful music. So congratulations. You're in for a treat to hear this beautiful new work, Ensemble. And Victoria's going to finish.
No, I'm not. I don't mean to finish, but I just wanted to say that, to you, which I have said before, but I'm very, very happy to say again, that the opportunity of being a composer in residence in this festival is kind of astonishing. Over the course of a week, I have heard a piece of mine performed that was written 30 years ago, and a piece of mine performed that was written 3 weeks ago, that was finished 3 weeks ago. And so it really is, it's like the olfactory sense for a composer. You know how when you might walk into a room and you smell someone's perfume and it reminds you of your grandmother when you were a child, and it takes you back and you think of it, everything's vivid. Like it's not just your grandmother when you were a child, it's the room you were standing in, and it's the food she was cooking, and it's the, clothes you were wearing, and it's all of those things. Hearing your music that you wrote some time ago, it takes you back to all of those places as well. And so I've kind of gone on a biographical, a biological journey. A biographical journey at Ore. We don't want to experience my biological journey. Although I'm happy to answer questions about it if anyone has some. Yes, and so it's a huge privilege for a composer to be able to have this beautiful group of people honouring the creative process and the work that someone's done. And I love the thought that there have been composers in residence before me who have experienced that, such as Selena, who's sitting here as well, and that there will be so very many afterwards as the festival continues and grows, and what contribution that will make to our composing landscape. So thank you so very, very much.